Welcome to the Kolbe Cast, episode 42. Glad you could join us. Today, Hope and Bonnie are joined by a veteran homeschooling mother who stands on the other side of a bridge so many are just now beginning to cross. We hope you will be encouraged and inspired by what she has to say. And as always, please reach out to us at podcast@kolbe.org. Enjoy the show.
Hi there, I'm Bonnie, Kolbe homeschooling mom, liturgical musician, podcast fanatic, heavy library user, and Kolbe parent ambassador. I have 2 lads and 2 lasses. The youngest is in 5th grade, the eldest is in 10th, and this is our 4th year homeschooling with Kolbe.
And I'm Hope, Bonnie's younger sister and a Kolbe alumna in a phase of life after being a student, but before becoming a parent. I studied communication theory and philosophy in college, then I went to law school. Now I'm an attorney, an avid home cook, and the fun aunt to Bonnie's kids.
And I'm Jordan. After slipping through 1,000 cracks, I completed a Ph.D. in History and Literature of Ancient Christianity at Göttingen University in Germany. Now I teach Greek and Latin at Kolbe and serve as the Director of Public and Alumni Relations.
Our guest today is Louise Deal, whose children are Kolbe alumni and who has a wealth of experience herself as a Kolbe homeschooling mom. Welcome to the Kolbe Cast, Mrs. Deal. We're so glad you joined us.
Oh, thanks. It's fun. It was fun to reminisce.
Oh, good. I'm so glad to hear that. We're looking forward to hearing your reminiscences and the things that worked well for you and your family and the role that Kolbe has played in your family life. So can you tell us a bit about yourself and your family?
Sure. I've been married for 35 years and I have 4 children, 2 girls, the oldest, 2 boys, the youngest, ages 30, 27, 25, and 22. So my youngest graduated 4 years ago, but I still remember a fair amount, I hope, to help. And the younger 3 were completely always homeschooled with Kolbe, but my oldest, I did not start homeschooling until 6th grade. So she was 6 through 12, but they're all Kolbe grads, as you mentioned. And Jessica, the oldest right now, she's finishing a Ph.D. from Catholic University of America. She's all but dissertation for Ph.D. in philosophy. So she went that route. She went undergrad philosophy at the University of Dallas, which Kolbe, well prepared her for because the curriculum is very, very interestingly the same, or a lot of overlap. And then she got her MA in philosophy at CUA as well. And then she's currently working as an administrative assistant with the Institute for Human Ecology at CUA while she's finishing her dissertation. And she just got married in the pandemic in June. And then Christina, she's my second and my next daughter. She got a BA in English from the University of Dallas, and she works in the marketing field. And she also just got married on January 2nd, so it's been busy. But so she did not go to graduate school. And then my 3rd child, Sam, so I had the 2 daughters that were the liberal arts, and then the 2 sons that were the STEM guys, so the engineering guys. And so Sam, it was really an answer to prayer, but I really wanted him to be able to get, a really good core and continue, a strong Catholic higher education, I guess you'd say. And so there was a 3+2 program offered by Franciscan University the year before he graduated high school. So he was only the 2nd class to do this. So he got his bachelor's in math from Franciscan, but then he finished his engineering degree at Notre Dame. Spent 2 years at Notre Dame to get his bachelor's in mechanical engineering. And he's currently in the 2nd year of a PhD program in robotics at Georgia Tech. So he's a busy guy. And then Daniel, my youngest, he's also did the 3-2 program at Franciscan, but he transferred back to WVU. So he's in his 2nd semester of his first transfer year to finish mechanical engineering as well. So hopefully in another year, he'll graduate with his mechanical engineering degree. So yeah, that's where they're at.
You're opposite of me. I have my boys are older and my girls are younger. So that's a fun
Oh,
flip flop. That's fun.
okay.
And we've got one who's very engineering minded here as well. My ears perk up when I hear that. So what sorts of things were your children into when they were Kolbe students?
Yeah, well, activity wise, music was required. So I just told them Kolbe required music because I didn't really have to do that with the girls. The girls were naturally attracted to studying music. So Jessica did piano and organ and voice. Christina did violin, piano and voice. Sam did piano and Daniel did piano or violin, sorry. And then in the early years, the girls did like some ballet and tennis, and then the boys did scouts and some biking. Everyone did swimming, and everyone did riflery because my husband was very into, target shooting kind of thing. And because he had done that in high school. But, we kind of made a conscious decision not to do any organized team sports, and really just for the sole reason that it was just so time consuming. We just felt like that was just going to be too much time. And so we, and we also did some other weird things like limiting cable. We didn't have any cable TV. We never bought them video games. We limited the internet. Nobody had a cell phone until they were allowed to drive. Nobody had a smartphone till college. So, we kind of, tried to, because there's only so many hours in a day. And so, that was kind of their activities, some music and some physical stuff.
I'm intrigued by this. We have several Kolbe families who we've visited with whose children have been involved in swimming as an extracurricular. And we didn't have the opportunity when I was growing up to be involved in that, but I enjoyed swimming just recreationally. And so I think it's neat to hear the families that have really embraced swimming as one of their physical outlets. And I'm intrigued by it because it's so far out of my experience, but it seems like it'd be a great balance, and it sounds like it's worked out well for families.
Yeah, I mean, and we were going from the standpoint of safety. We just wanted them to all be strong swimmers, but we were never going to get into swims team stuff. Oh my gosh, you talk about time consuming. Whoa, those people are dedicated. And so, we mostly did it through, fortunately, a swim lessons and a swim club kind of thing, but thankfully. They were always saying, oh, don't you want to be on the team? We're like, no, that's okay.
Tell us then about how you organized your days when you were homeschooling everyone.
Yeah, this was when thinking back on this, it's a bit hard to answer because, it's very different at different ages. And so, early on, the youngest got the most attention, especially, being focused on, learning to read really well. And but thinking back to the year, say that, I had a 12th grader, a 9th grader, a 7th grader, and a 4th grader, that was pretty intense because you had the gamut there. And that was kind of, prime homeschooling time. And of course, they were more independent at that point. Everybody could read. And what I had to do, I found is, for me anyway, is I made an Excel spreadsheet and I had like a general structure of every day because, I had 3 people needing to practice piano every day. Well, you can't, so they can't be fighting over whose turn it is to write or whatever, so I had times for that kind of thing. And of course, we weren't a slave to the schedule, but it really helped, structure things in general. And, I obviously, like I said, I wasn't looking at minute to minute, but it just helped a lot to, and then I also had sort of a separate schedule for activities and lessons. But when, we would always have a morning family prayer time together. And when the girls were seriously into music, they would get up really early, practice before morning prayer. Then we'd have morning prayer together. We'd read a saint of the day, or when the kids were younger, Bible stories, we'd pray certain prayers together. In the later years, we would pray the family rosary in the evening, and Dad would read a lot to the kids. He read a lot of Little House on the Prairie and Bible stories at bedtime. But But as far as the schedule went too, the other thing I did was anyone who was in K through 8th grade got like planned out day to day, week by week, a to-do list essentially that I would fill in kind of. I had this standard to-do list, and so it had every week of the quarter and then every day of the week. And so the biggest challenge with that was, keeping up with grading when they were, when we were in this more intense period of, I really wanted to stay on top of the math because I felt like that is really important to have instant feedback. So I never wanted to get behind on grading math, and then grading paper topics was time consuming. But the quarterly reports really kept me accountable. I dreaded doing them every time, but then I was like, they really kept me on track. So that was, a blessing in a way. So, but I think that was kind of the basic structure of things. So, yeah.
That's great. It's so interesting to hear how people make things work, especially when there are several in the mix, several different ages. And I think it's all too easy to get set on it's always going to be like this, or we're in this particular stage. But like you made reference to, it's the seasons change. It looks different when everyone's little than it will when everyone's getting older and more independent. And so I think that's helpful. I know it's helpful for me looking down the road to those who have children farther along in the progression, and thinking back to what it was like for us when we started out a few years ago.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, and it was also really, looking back, it was really the experience of bringing a 6th grader home was really a shock, because she was, very academically gifted. And at the time I had only had my one daughter, the very cooperative, compliant child, who was homeschooled for K1 and 2. And then all of a sudden I had a 6th grader, a 3rd grader, and a 1st grader, like all at once. And so that was really, and it was interesting because it was only a couple, maybe 2 or 3 weeks in, my oldest said, "Well, I'm never going back to school." And I was like, what, really? Like we were just kind of trying this for you, but okay, why? And she said, well, she gave 3 reasons. She said, I can read good books and I don't have to worry about what I look like, my hair or my clothes, and I don't have to wait on everybody else to finish stuff. And so that was kind of it for her. She never did go back to school. And but I remember too, I wanted to tell this story because I think it may encourage some other moms, is that when she came home in 6th grade and we jumped into that that National Catholic Reader, that old, Catholic Reader, it was challenging. And she was, like I said, she was gifted, but I was having trouble with some of the readings, and so she did kind of poorly on the first quarterly exam. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I called up Kolbe, and at the time, of course, I guess did we have internet at that time? Gosh, I can't even remember. But basically I called up Kolbe and said, can you put me in touch with any moms in my area that use Kolbe? And sure enough, they had a mom, you had to give permission, obviously, but this mom who lived about an hour south of me had given permission. And I called her up and I was like, my daughter just failed her quarterly exam. What do I do? And she was so nice and talked me through it. And we're good friends to this day. So I owe a dear friendship to Kolbe as well. But that was challenging. And but yeah, it was we worked through it. So
when we started homeschooling, our oldest was going into 7th grade. So similar, that sort of adjustment. Okay, we're all here and we're all going to do this. And what do we do first? And who does what? And whoa, some of this is much more challenging. And you want us to do what? And but at the same time, oh wow, we're not all up hitting the ground at really early time, getting all stressed out before we get out the door. And there, among other things that we were immediately grateful for, that really we saw right away. Yeah.
Well, that brought back another memory too. What you just said is, I remember she was really focused on grades and me grading everything, and I was like, I'm not going to do that. Like I don't have time to do that. So you'll get feedback and but you're not going to get every single thing graded. And it was nice to get her off of that and just more into the, to love learning.
I really like those 3 points that she brought up about she could read good books. She didn't have to worry about what she looked like or doing her hair. And she didn't have to wait on other people, because I think I remember being a 6th grade girl, and middle school is so tough, just that developmental age, and then the social stresses and things like that. I'm impressed. I don't think I could have identified so clearly why I liked homeschooling in middle school as those bullet points that she put together, but they really connect into the bigger picture of this curiosity and thirst for knowledge, and then this kind of authenticity and individuality, and not trying to fit into a particular mold, and then working at your best pace. Like you mentioned, there are only so many hours in a day, and learning how to maximize those for your various pursuits, academic, extracurricular, physical, spiritual, all of them. And so that's awesome that she picked up on that so quickly and could describe it so succinctly. I'm impressed.
Yeah.
One thing I appreciate is how much room is made for their interests, for them to develop those interests. And if they're interested in something, but it's not cool, so to speak, or other people aren't interested in it, that tends to kind of squelch that sometimes, right?
Oh,
And
absolutely.
I think it's come up a number of times. I see it both with Jordan and Hope, who are homeschooled themselves, that they both have this strong sense of self and had this time and space to cultivate those interests and know themselves well, and just be really comfortable in their own persons. And just to have that space and room for that to develop, I think is highly valuable too.
Absolutely. I mean, my daughters were extremely accomplished in their primary instrument, which was piano, and then the younger one, violin. And they never would have attained that high level of proficiency on their instruments if it weren't for homeschooling. I mean, they both even considered, majoring in music. I mean, but there was no way, because homeschooling, allowed that time and flexibility for practice, and for them to get their practice in at the best time of the day for them, and we could structure our days to do things, when they were at their best for that particular activity. And especially the block scheduling in high school, when we did that, that was huge. And I just loved seeing them like make the connections between the history and the literature and the theology, especially my oldest. She was just, born for Kolbe, I felt like, and she made all those connections. But I think what also shocked me about when she embraced it so quickly is she was a very, very social, or she is still a very, very social kid, and I was afraid she was going to miss that. But then you realize there isn't, she wasn't getting that kind of social, that was good at school, and she didn't miss it a bit. But I guess why I was shocked too is I'm not a super creative person. I wasn't a super creative teacher. I basically wanted them to get independent as soon as possible, because that would save me time, and in high school especially, they got the course plans, go for it, ask me if you need help, but I'm here to help. But I wanted to, facilitate them in independent learning as much as possible. And I'd be there for feedback and questions, of course, and marking red all over their paper topics. But
Sure. I was just speaking with a homeschooling mom about the immense weight she felt to teach all the things to all the children. She was really feeling that keenly and struggling with that, and her children are young. But I was hoping to point out to her, just like I was saying about the seasons, it won't always be like this. We're moving ever closer toward them taking more on, that it's not all up to us moms to dump all this knowledge on them and them to take it in. Like you don't just like shove it in there somehow. And to use a sort of crude expression, I all the images I have of imparting this way, and they're not terribly pleasant mental images. And maybe that's for the best. That works out just fine because that's not actually what we're meant to be doing here. Yeah.
Right, right. Yeah, and it's flexible too. And the things that I wasn't strong in, we sought out elsewhere. Like, we're fortunate to live in a university town, so they were able to take Italian at college in high school and get college credit for it. And so that was their language. And they also studied Latin with a retired university professor because they were phasing out Latin at the time. And anyway, yeah, so there were things like that we, supplemented as needed kind of thing.
Yeah, another great reminder that it's not all up to just mom. We are facilitators. Yes, we teach, but we also manage other resources. That's great.
Right. It's more like I felt like I was needing to do the research and for each kid, get them the best combination of things that would, again, allow them, right, to flourish.
So among all that mix, how did you also handle your other obligations? Work, volunteering, projects, your spiritual life, hobbies, things like that?
Well, we talked about homeschooling being really flexible and so that helps a lot. I had parents who were on the older end of things, and so at one point, I had caregiving obligations to them and whatnot, and homeschooling allowed us that flexibility. But to be honest, I tried to limit my other obligations as much as possible. As you say, for this season, it was a good day if, we got prayer in, school in, and dinner. That was a good day. I kind of lowered my expectations. I remember going to this homeschool conference and the speaker stood up there and said, "You didn't start homeschooling to have a clean house." Like that was, I hired occasional cleaning help just to kind of keep my head above water. I had the kids do chores as well, but it just gave me some peace of mind that way. And then we had enough moms at one point, and now it's growing, but back when I started, my oldest was the only person in only Catholic high school homeschooler. We don't have a Catholic high school in our town. So, she didn't have any, support group that way. So we formed like a local Catholic homeschooling group of some Catholic moms, and it's still going and increasing today. So that's kind of neat. But yeah, I really tried to limit. I didn't do a lot of stuff. And the stuff I did do, I tried to make sure it was with the kid. Like we got involved with pro-life stuff, but that was the girls were doing that and I was doing it along with them or things like that. But I didn't do a lot, on my own, just volunteering like I can now.
Mm-hmm. I think that's important to remember that back to the season thing, there will be time for these things.
Right.
We are where we are right now. And when I try to do all the things, I don't do very many of them very well, if at all. So if I'm still more selective about what I do now, and then that does come to a natural conclusion, some of the things, on their own timeline, and then I can take up something else. So that's a reminder for me. I when ours were all very young, somebody introduced me to that idea of the seasons, and I had to reconcile myself to that idea, and I have since come to embrace it. Like,
yeah.
It sounds like your homeschooling made space for life to happen and to deal with the unexpected as well, or living life, as you say, taking care of your parents and other things that come up. There was space for that, thanks in part to your homeschooling arrangements.
Definitely.
So recently I came across a quote from St. Vincent de Paul that it sounds like you have lived out, Mrs. Deal, with the way that you said, if you had school, prayer, and dinner, it was a good day, and having those as your waypoints. So this quote from St. Vincent de Paul I saw recently was, "It is a ruse of the devil by which he deceives good people to induce them to do more than they are able, so that they end up not being able to do anything. The Spirit of God urges one gently to do the good that can be done reasonably, so that it may be done perseveringly and for a long time."
That is a really good quote. I know I didn't know that quote, but that is so much wisdom in that quote. And when you mentioned, when you said dinner and reflecting my thought back to me, I should have mentioned that one thing that also really helped me, I feel like, is I had gotten into the habit really before homeschooling even of planning out a week or two's worth of meals. And I also always like cooked extra on the weekend and froze stuff so that during the week, I tried to minimize meal prep stress as much as possible. and not having to, at 5 o'clock, try to figure out what I was going to make for dinner that night, but I kept things very simple. I'm certainly not a gourmet cook. I mean, I'm a good cook on certain things, but I just tried to keep things very simple during the week to minimize that.
Yes, big fans of the meal planning here. Knowing what it is, even if we move them around, like I make a plan for a week or two in advance, and then we can shift stuff around if we need to. But knowing that we have that sketched out, oh yeah, definitely.
I always wrote it in pencil, so just in case.
Yep. Me too. So your boys are in STEM fields. We've had the great pleasure of visiting with a number of alumni in liberal arts fields, and we'd like to hear some more from folks in STEM fields and families in that realm.
Sure. You're talking to a husband and wife, a father and mother that were both STEM. Okay, so my husband's a mechanical engineer.
Okay.
I'm a mechanical engineer with physical. Then I went into biomedical and physical therapy. So we both have this like science type background, right? And that's why we felt so strongly about Kolbe because we know what we missed. Okay. My education was so incomplete. After looking back, I'll date myself. I graduated from high school in 1980, and the math science focus left no time for anything else. And what little else I got was terrible. So because I went to a big public state school, but at any rate, a classical and Catholic education is a benefit to everybody, no matter what field you're pursuing. I'll never forget one of the first Kolbe catalogs I opened up. It had this fantastic quote from Mark Twain, and it said, "A man who doesn't read good books is no better off than a man who can't read." And that just struck me. That just hit me. It's like, yes. And so, I feel like a Kolbe education is more important for kids who are going to pursue STEM fields, because likely they won't have time or access to good core if, depending on where they go to school. So it's interesting. And as far as I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but I'll say that, the classical Catholic pursuit of the truth and being able to think and communicate well and have this knowledge of history and being formed in the faith and the virtues, all those things together, besides making good citizens and making good saints, advance the common good on earth. And so if they go into a STEM field, it's huge to be able to communicate well. It doesn't matter how much research you can do. It doesn't matter how much, if you can't communicate, and it's typical that people in this area or in that field who study a lot of math science are weaker on their communication skills. So I feel like that's one of the biggest why it benefits people in all fields, but especially STEM.
This idea that you share about bringing your own STEM background and being intrigued by Kolbe and being drawn to Kolbe for its holistic education, that I am fascinated by, just the balance of the sciences. And I think that we often hear about the Newman schools and things like that are great schools, and it's great that Kolbe students go to them, but I'm always very conscious. I don't want to inadvertently reinforce stereotypes that if you get a classical liberal arts education, you're just headed for a life in the library. And so hearing how the liberal arts and communication skills and analysis skills, that all of the benefits of Kolbe were both a draw for STEM parents and then a great foundation for STEM students.
Well, Kolbe is very rigorous, but it's also very flexible, right? And so my oldest, she did the whole 9 yards. She was assuming, she did everything and above and beyond. Like she was the Kolbe, quintessential poster child, I guess you could say. Whereas, so my sons, my daughters went the liberal arts directions, but my sons did not. And so I did, I modified things slightly. I might have required a little less paper topics from them, or, I'll never forget. So my youngest is probably like the least academic of all four. Okay. School was a struggle, and, he just was not, the joyful gung-ho student. He was more of a hands-on kind of get out there kind of guy. So anyway, he was the least academic. And I remember thinking, gosh, can he handle Kolbe? I don't know. Going back and forth, he's approaching high school, thinking, boy, what do I do here? And then I thought, what are you saying, Louise? I was, mad at myself for even considering not doing Kolbe, because I said, why would I deprive him of all the benefits of this education that I 100%, am on board with and think it's going to save civilization? Why would I deprive him of these benefits? I just needed to modify more for him, and he was going to get out of it what he would get out of it. And I remember, because he was, compared to the older three, and, it's hard not to compare, but you do, he was just, his writing I thought was atrocious, okay, compared to my older kid. And I was so worried, and I was like, oh my gosh, how's he going to do in college? I just don't know. His writing's so terrible. Even though I'd correct, he would still, making the same mistakes. But then I had the fortunate blessing of, my daughter by this time, the one that's getting her Ph.D. at Catholic U, by this time she was teaching freshman philosophy classes. And so some of the writing that she saw, and I would show her Daniel's stuff, and she was like, oh, Mom, you have nothing to worry about. Trust me. You don't know what I'm grading. And so, that also speaks to look at the decline in preparedness and the quality of freshman students these days. It's shocking. And so a Kolbe education, at least that your child is prepared and has a true education. And in fact, I just heard another discussion recently sponsored by that Institute for Human Ecology, where the president of Catholic U was lamenting this. He said kids are coming in and needing remedial stuff. And it's basically college is the new high school. It's really shocking.
Oh, yeah. We've heard from a few college professors similar things, and it's at once so concerning, but it also increases my gratitude for the opportunity that we have with Kolbe. And it's reassuring to hear you speak about your experience and the gamut that you've run with your students and where they are now and how that has helped them get to where they are now. You mentioned modifying, and I think this is something that maybe the new homeschoolers among us, the new Kolbe families, that's one of those things that's easy, I think, to forget that we have this latitude to modify. So do you have a couple of examples where you might have modified?
Yeah, and that's huge too, because that's the beauty of Kolbe. You have the freedom to modify, whereas I felt like some other programs that I would hear about, you didn't have that freedom. And your child best. And so, for instance, my oldest was doing 3 paper topics every week, for the whole 9 weeks or whatever the quarter was, 8 weeks, and then whereas my youngest, we would go through before the quarter started, and he would have to do over the quarter, he would have to do 2 theology, 2 literature, and 2 history. And so, he was doing one paper topic a week, so that was an example of, because he was not my writer. And so, the other special things I would say, if you're considering, a STEM field, is you do have to make sure the math skills are solid. The math skills and concepts are really solid. And one piece of advice I had gotten at the time, which helped with my youngest one, is repeat algebra if necessary. You've got to have strong algebra skills. They're critical. And to this day, the algebra is what gets kids later on. They don't have that really strong algebra. And then, a lot of people would say, oh my gosh, your kids aren't doing labs. How are they going to go into engineering, right? Well, believe me, labs are not that important. What is important, though, is exposure in general to what my husband likes to call tinkering. Let them tinker, let them do stuff on their own. But exposure to like formal labs and all that is generally a waste of time. And so, you need the lab credit. You go through it however you get it, for Kolbe, but it really does not affect college in the least, in my opinion. But what is really important also is strong chemistry and physics. And Kolbe has that. Kolbe has great chemistry and physics textbooks. So it's important, though, if you're not strong in it, to get outside help, to get the tutors you need, because I had to do that for chemistry. I thought, I'm going to remember my chemistry. I remembered nothing from chemistry. And so, basically nothing. It was like after the first couple of weeks, I was lost. I'm like, help, so get them a tutor or get them, some outside help. And the other thing I would say is that the AP tests we found were not worth it. My guys did AP Calc and did they do AP Physics? One of them did AP Physics, yeah. And for my one son who was really strong, but it's not worth it, mostly because you need to have it reinforced in college. Anyway, very few colleges give you college credit for it. It just wasn't. And I think a lot of this testing stuff is going by the wayside thanks to COVID anyway. So I don't think that's going to be a problem. But and then the other thing I would really strongly recommend is try to seek out a place, if you can, that has one of those strong either 3-2 programs where you can have time for some good core in college, or a co-op program where they can work. But I would really be looking around at what the core is with the engineering degree, because it's, it shouldn't be just totally neglected, in my opinion.
We just visited with the math chair for Kolbe, Kelly Powers, on a recent episode. I think it's episode 33. And you mentioned algebra. She said that algebra 2 is the punchline whenever kids say, well, when do I need to learn this? Why do I need to slow down and show my work? Why do I need to understand how to get here this way versus that way? And she said she always comes back to algebra 2. You need to use it with algebra. And so that dovetails perfectly with what you were saying about getting that foundation. And then the other things that you recommended sound like they are, again, a really solid foundation for future success.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I did know enough, I was okay helping the kids up until calculus, right? And then I didn't want to relearn calculus. And so, we had, like I said, an outside tutor and some outside, resources with Kolbe online by that point and stuff to get us through calculus. But yeah, it was funny because, I was such a stickler early on with the algebra and everything to showing your work and plugging in the numbers at the end and checking your units and all of those things that were drilled into me, right? And the boys would grumble about it. Well, then what were they hearing when they finally got to outside teacher? The same exact things, So I was
Yep. You mentioned chemistry tutor. I only survived high school chemistry with twice a week tutoring from a friend of our family's. And what you said about formal labs being kind of overrated in the high school years, I would
cook various things for her as a thank you. And whenever she would come over, she said, these cooking projects that you're doing, like scaling recipes, planning things out, different things like that, those are as good as labs. Like, don't worry about it. And she was the chemistry teacher at the local high school. And she was always very, that's right. Yeah. You had her at public school, and then she was my tutor, and she was all about just get in the kitchen, learn how to follow recipes, learn how to keep your workstation clean, things like that. And it was kind of a variation on that tinkering idea that you brought up.
Right, right.
Good stuff. It's great to hear your perspective, your husband's perspective, with the backgrounds that you have, and how that informs how you approached the Kolbe curriculum and up to now. That's so helpful, really. Is there anything that you wish you'd known when you started homeschooling, or that you would tell a new homeschooling family today?
Oh, definitely. I number one on the list, and this is going to sound counterintuitive to STEM, but limit technology and screen time. Focus on basic concepts and abstract thought, okay? And limit that stuff will come later, and I just can't emphasize that enough. Also, developing strong family traditions and centering your life on your faith and liturgical year and having that rhythm. I think the kids remember that. And seeking out support from other like-minded families, that was huge for us. But also, persevering, it's really hard, but perseverance is so key to keep reminding yourself, because the world is all these other messages. Oh, you're not good enough to teach your kid. Oh, you don't know what you're doing. We, the experts, we know better, right? But you know your child best. I wouldn't have said this when I first got into homeschooling, but now I would say that public school's not an option just because of the social indoctrination agenda they have. And Catholic schools, they're really expensive, or it's very rare to find a truly Catholic one. And even if your child is not, say, going to be going to college, maybe they're going to be doing a trade or something else. Again, I think it's even more important to have the Kolbe education, because that's the beauty of Kolbe. It's rigorous enough for a selective college, but adaptable enough for those who decide to pursue a trade. And the formation, like in the faith and virtue, it's done in the family, and you're never going to get this time back with your kids. But I would say too, another big advice I have is just the busyness and overscheduling are probably the greatest enemy to the family, and you have to constantly fight against it. And it's hard because you do want to do everything, and you want to give your kids all these wonderful opportunities, and there's lots of wonderful things out there, and even now it's even more overwhelming. And then the other thing I did that I think helped too was to have a summer plan. Have a plan to sort of just a couple very light things, but to keep their math skills going or keep them reading, just some little thing that they have to do. It was not intense. It was not, but just having a little bit of structure in the summer really helped them not lose stuff and helped us get back started again, in the fall. So yeah, those are probably my biggest thing would be to say, what I wish I could impart, or what I wish I'd known, is to just have that confidence, just have that confidence that you can do this and it is the best thing for your child.
Oh, wonderful. It's so many practical, helpful tips, also big picture and confidence boosting. In the absence of a friend down the street or an hour away, like you found through Kolbe, you're serving that purpose this way, and I'm sure it will be gratefully received by many of our listeners. That's great, and that's neat that you found. Speaking about the friend that you found, that's wonderful. That's been a neat thing to find fellow Kolbe families in our region, and this way now with our online capabilities to connect even more with Kolbe families. But hearing that you found one when you did. That's wonderful too.
Yeah, it was a blessing. And the other thing I think I'm forever grateful to Kolbe for, really in a debt that I could never repay, is that Kolbe enabled me to give my kids the education I didn't have. They say you can't give what you don't have, but Kolbe allowed me to do that. I mean, it was all laid out there. It was all there, and all the sacrifice, all the time, everything. I'd do it again in a heartbeat.
I'm just sitting here listening, just soaking it up. It's just wonderful.
Me too.
Great stuff. This has been a fantastic conversation. We appreciate so much you sharing your wealth of knowledge and experience with us, Louise. We're so glad that your Kolbe experience went as well as it did, and that we're so grateful that you have given back to us in sharing your experience this way. This has been a great gift to the whole Kolbe community, and we thank you very much.
Oh, well, thank you. It's like I said, the least I could do, and no way could I repay. So Kolbe, I'm just so happy that it's growing and flourishing and continuing to touch lives.
Mary, our Mother, pray for us. St. Maximilian Kolbe, pray for us. Ad Majorem Dei Gloriam.